The Toronto Blue Jays made some roster moves today, so we'll break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as some injury updates and John Schneider calling out everyone in Major League Baseball after that decision that we saw yesterday. So we'll have that and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. The Jays are getting a pretty exciting series underway today. I don't know if it's going to be exciting for Jays fans or for the Blue Jays, but we know that the Dodgers are coming in town, and Shohei Ohtani will be at the Rogers Center, so it should be very interesting to see what kind of reception he gets from the fans after seemingly signing here in the offseason. So we'll see how that unfolds tonight, but it should be a very fun series between the Jays and the Dodgers this weekend. Looking forward to that, Nick. But we got some injury updates. We got some roster moves that were made. And most importantly, John Schneider was not happy after yesterday's decision to call the game after 5 innings. He called out the MLB umpires. He called out the league. He called out everybody that was involved in making that decision. And I don't blame him because that was pretty ridiculous. And the Jays now have one more L in the loss column after just 5 innings of baseball. So couldn't have been too happy, especially after waiting around for 3.5 hours. But Nick, let's start with the injury updates and the roster moves that the Jays made today ahead of tonight's big series against the Dodgers. They got to pick up some results here because that's 3 losses in a row, and they got to find ways to get back in the W column here.
Let's do it. And before we get into it, quick reminder: hit the subscribe button. I guess technically the moves were made yesterday, but they're officially actually going to matter today because guess what? Bowden Francis is going to the IL, and we got some I got an update recently from John Schneider. So let's start with this, Peter. Bowden Francis has been placed on the 15-day IL, and then Brandon Little was recalled for today's game and yesterday's game. But yesterday they didn't even play a game, basically. They only played 5 innings, which was brutal. And Peter, this is kind of surprising, and they talked about it on the broadcast. Bowden Francis was finally starting to kind of solidify himself a little bit in the lineup. Or in the bullpen, sir, and he's been doing very well, and he has been battling his right forearm extensor tendonitis issue since an outing last week. No structural concerns. The Jays are kind of just getting ahead of it, and they're optimistic that with the rest and proper treatment in coming days, he'll be back to throwing before long. Hopefully it won't be a lengthy IL stint, and I mean, we have Brendan Little in our starting pitcher depth has kind of evaporated. Mitch White's gone. Wes Parsons is gone. Alek Manoah, which we'll briefly touch on later, is looking really rocky out there. So this is not great, but at least they're getting ahead of it, and they have a healthy arm in there for tonight.
Yeah, and Bowden Francis figures to be pretty important here. Not right now necessarily for the Blue Jays, but once Yariel Rodriguez's innings limit really starts to kick in, which I don't know what the Jays' plans are on that front, but we do figure that he will leave the rotation at some point and he'll join the bullpen, or they'll try to limit his innings, or they'll send him down. They'll do something in order for him to be a contributor later on down the season. But for right now, Yariel Rodriguez has been pretty good in that number 5 spot, so no issues or no cause for concern there. But Bowden Francis moved into that setup role that was occupied by Mitch White, or not setup, to that long relief role that was occupied by Mitch White, and briefly Wes Parsons to start the season and kind of mop up duty as well, which is not the most glamorous role on a baseball team. It's not something that's going to get you headlines in the newspaper or anything like that, but it's important because when the Jays lose, let's say 9-2, and they need someone to eat innings, it's Bowden Francis. You don't want to send Trevor Richards out there because you might use him in leverage the next day. You don't want to have to use Tim Meza in a 9-2 ball game because you might need him when you play a close one tomorrow. So it's a very important role, and it sucks that this happened to Bowden Francis after a pretty rocky start to the season. Decent his last time out, but yeah, he's got to get healthy. Don't rush him back because the Jays need him in there. And even though it's not a glamorous role, even though you're not going to get any wins on your record, or your ERA probably won't get aided by coming into mop-up duty, someone's got to do it. And Bowden Francis was that designated guy. And now who's going to do it? I guess Brandon Little could come in and fill that void, but not much major league experience on him.
No, and he is another lefty, for those of you interested. So now we have 3 lefties with Meza, Hennesis, and Little, and you cover most of it. Bowden Francis. It's going to be interesting to see what they do now when Yariel Rodriguez starts. Maybe Alek Manoah, potentially he is going to come back, but I don't think he's quite there yet. But let us know your thoughts are on that. And Peter, let's move on to the fun part now, which is Schneider calls out the umpires, it calls out the MLB. We streamed during the rain delay, which ended up being the game ending. which yeah, I'm just going to get into the comments. He had a lot to say. So, Blue Jays versus Royals was called because the field was deemed unplayable, particular concern with ground around shortstop. And Schneider said the entire day was handled kind of poorly. In my opinion, the field was significantly better than it was in the third, fourth, and fifth. And we saw Bo Bichette make a play to end the fifth inning in puddles. And then they come out, they do all the stuff, and they still don't end up playing. He said the field was too loose, and he disagreed with the fact that it's looser now than it was in the fifth inning when Bo fielded a ball through a lake and threw it over to first. And in a game where, or really a division where every single win counts, every win matters, only down one run, a game like this, we saw it in 2021, we bring it up often, the Semien throw cost them the game, they missed the playoffs by one game. Not to say that they were necessarily going to win this, but only one run down with four more chances at the dish. This is, there should be a rule change regarding this, but I don't know. Maybe that's for the next CBA or whatever.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty ridiculous as well, especially considering that the Blue Jays had to wait around for about 3.5 hours until the game was officially called. They had to travel and they had to go back to Toronto, which is not right around the corner from Kansas City. I'm not a geographer or whatever, but it's not close. Okay, you're going from the Midwest of the United States all the way back to Canada. It takes a while, so you're delaying that flight by 3.5 hours. Now the Jays have to play a three-game set against one of the best teams in baseball after being stranded in the rain and thinking that they were going to finish out a baseball game yesterday. That's not good. That outlook does not look good for the rest of the weekend. So I thought if you were going to call it, and if you didn't think that the weather would hold up or the field would hold up, call it right away. It would have sucked in the moment because yeah, it's 5 innings, and the Jays didn't really deserve to lose that one because it was terrible conditions and they should have had another crack at it. If I'm being totally honest, we've been critical of the team, Nick, in the early portion of the season, but I think they could have done a little bit of damage in yesterday's weather, considering how much the pitchers were struggling with their command. So it sucks. Very unfortunate for them. It's their third loss in a row, technically. So now what do? We got to pivot quickly to this game and try to pick up a win against the Dodgers, who don't have a great pitcher on the mound tonight, but it's still the Dodgers. So it's going to be tough. And yeah, poorly handled by everyone that was in charge. I mean, credit to the umpires for trying to get the game going, but obviously it wasn't enough because Jay still had to wait around for almost 4 hours and nothing got underway. So
Yeah.
stupid.
And the Barrios start now. That's a Barrios start gone. Only went 5 innings. He was struggling with the weather, his command, his velocity. He ended up having a decent start, only giving up 2 runs, but Schneider was not very happy with that at all. And I mean, neither am I, or neither are us, or any Jays fans really, because of the loss column. I'm sure the Royals are okay, even though they had an afternoon game today, so I'm sure the travel wasn't great on them either, but it definitely hurts a little bit. Now, Peter, quickly before we wrap up, is Manoah looked very rocky out there. He had a rough start his first time, a decent start the last time, and then yesterday he had a pretty rough game. And John Schneider called Alek Manoah's start not ideal. You'd like to see him hitting his stride before you do anything. He'll continue his rehab. No conversation about changing that yet, and no conversation about Rodriguez's rotation spot being taken. So no conversation at all, as you can see here. Any quick thoughts on this? Obviously, he's just struggling. He's going to have to get his footing right in AAA. He's going to have to earn it at this point. He's been up and down too many times for us to just, or the Jays to just hand him a spot at this point.
Yeah, no, that ship has sailed. He had a chance coming into spring training to be that guy, the fifth starter spot, and all he had to do was show that he was competent and that he was back to being a major league level pitcher. He couldn't even do that. He lasted an inning and a third in his first outing, got shelled, couldn't locate anything, any of his pitches. And then he was on the IL and didn't pitch for a few weeks after that. So he had the chances to go ahead and prove himself again. But now he's starting back from square one. And this is just a whole new journey for Alek Manoah. He's got to try to make the big leagues again if he could ever get back to that level. Like he was coming in as a big time prospect. Okay, this guy is going to be at the top of the rotation for a while here. And obviously it didn't unfold that way for whatever reason, whether it's mental, whether he just doesn't feel right anymore. His arm, I don't know what it is with Alek Manoah, but before the Jays even consider bringing him up, we got to see, I'd say like 8 to 10 solid starts, like consistent starts. I'm not saying he's got to go out and shove for 7 innings at a time and strike out 15 batters. I'm not expecting that from him. I don't think he'll ever get back to that level of dominance. But what I am expecting is for him to be able to get outs at the AAA level. If he's walking AAA level hitters, and if he's struggling to get through 3 or 4 innings in AAA Buffalo, then there's no question that he's not ready for the major leagues. He's not even close to being ready right now. So tear him back down, make sure that he's fully rebuilt here, and then start to build him back up again. I don't know what happened with him. It's sad to see. As a Jays fan, feels like this happens too often, just with players flaming out and not being what they're supposed to be. But I'll digress. I hope he can make a full comeback because he was very exciting to watch at the early portion of his major league career, not last season. So let's hope he can figure it out.
Yeah, hopefully he can recoup some of that. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to track his journey. I've been tracking him for a while, and he just hasn't found it yet and is yet to really. I mean, we saw him come back last year, and then he just fizzled out again. But that'll wrap it up. One final thing I want to throw in there is Jackson Holliday was sent down to AAA today. So for everyone who wants potentially a Relvis, they're going to make sure that he's good in the AAA level. I mean, Jackson Holliday went like 2 for 40. So that's an interesting thing, but that'll wrap it up. Let us know your thoughts
It's
on
not
it.
a perfect science. It's
Yeah.
not a perfect science. Just because you're killing it in AAA doesn't always translate right away to the majors. So we'll see. We'll see. You got to wait and see with these prospects.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and hopefully the Jays can take care of business tonight. See you tomorrow.